We are so pleased that all of you joined us for lunch today. I know this is going to be an interesting program that's going to spark a lot of enthusiasm for the topic we'll be discussing. I thought I'd set the stage a little bit for the place we're in, given the seriousness of this subject matter. Before my colleague Charlene Seidle welcomes you. 74 years ago this morning, we woke up to the reality of a war with Japan. And on that day, there were immediate calls for the sequestration of Japanese American citizens. A few months ago, a man by the name of Tak Sujimoto met here with our farmers. And Julian Duvall from the garden, we'd given Tak a tour of the garden and showed him around the ranch. Tak, on December 7, 1941, was a 9-year-old boy who lived across the street from us. His family was one of the 7 local Japanese American farming families that were growing vegetables in this area. In fact, he sort of jokes about the idea that we call this the flower capital of the world, and well in advance of that, we were growing food. But he sat here and very emotionally sort of gave a real deep meaning for this space. He, in a very emotional way, shared the story about how Paul Ecke Sr. invited his Japanese American fellow farmers to store their goods, store their possessions, and in Tak's case, Tak's father gave Paul the truck that he was driving, and during the term of his internment, Paul took care of those things. We're not sure what barn was used. This one upstairs. So Elizabeth Ecke, so her grandfather, invited the neighbors to store their possessions in this barn, and talks about that in a very emotional way, and thanked the Ecke family for making that possible so that his father, following his internment, could reintegrate into a job and to create a future for his family. I thought that was especially poignant, given the day, given the story, for us to talk about the space, and given the seriousness of what we're going to talk about today, and the American story. The American story is the immigrant story. There's so many chapters to it, and there's so many similarities to the chapters, and today we'll talk about the new evolving chapter of our immigrant story. I want to thank all of you for coming, and I'm going to invite my colleague up to the mic to introduce the day.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's so meaningful to be here today in the place that provided such a sanctuary for people who were so vulnerable. So it's really very, very meaningful. I want to add my welcome to Jim's. We're so pleased to welcome such a diverse group of people that represents a broad swath of community leadership and stakeholders. We've all come together because we care about what really can be called the greatest humanitarian crisis of our generation, the Syrian refugee crisis. I want to give a special welcome to Encinitas City Council members Lisa Schaefer and Tony Kranz. And also Leichtag Foundation board member Emily Einhorn. And Nikki Mazzaroli, our program officer, who's working with me on this initiative and will join me up here later. We're also going to have an opportunity in a little bit to go around the room. I know it's a big group, but it will be just great for everybody to say their name and affiliation quickly so we can just meet the diverse people who are in this room. The numbers of this crisis are astounding and can seem really overwhelming. The Syrian civil war has resulted in the deaths of more than 200,000 civilians. Over half the population of Syria, or about 6.6 million, have been displaced. 3.5 million people have fled to other countries, becoming refugees. In total, close to 13 million people need humanitarian assistance. Over these last few months, we've all been asked by many people, why the Leichtag Foundation cares about this issue, why we have taken it on, and why we suspended new grant making early this year in order to study, reallocate, and focus on this issue. There are a few reasons, but they really boil down to two primary factors. One, the Leichtags were Jewish. We are a Jewish foundation. We are guided by the teachings and the core values of our tradition. Our Torah, our seminal document, teaches us, quote, "You shall not wrong or oppress a stranger, for you were once strangers." In this passage, the Torah is referring to our time as slaves in the land of Egypt, but actually Jews have been strangers over many generations, cast out and unwelcome. Our founder, Lee Leichtag, his picture's right there, himself was the son of refugees from Hungary who came to this country seeking a better life. 3 of my own grandparents were refugees who fled the horrors of Europe on the onset of World War II, becoming the sole survivors of once large families. They were not admitted to this country, by the way. They went to South Africa and Rhodesia. Our history as Jews and repeatedly fleeing persecution must make us sensitive to and compassionate for those who suffer similar fates and experiences. We believe that refugees should be treated with compassion and dignity. Today is the first day of the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah. We have some special treats for you for Hanukkah, and we've also put out some special menorahs, which are the candelabras that we light each night in order to spread light in a world that becomes increasingly dark. This brings me to the second reason the Leichtag Foundation is involved, because we're Americans. Lee and Toni Leichtag proudly declared that they were the embodiment of the American dream. They proved that refugees can be a strong force in our economy, developing business and providing better community. Our nation has opened its shores to the oppressed, seeking refuge over many generations. Indeed, our nation is a country of immigrants, and we're thankful to the ADL and to Monica Bauer for providing these buttons that remind us that we are a nation of immigrants, that prove that diversity and inclusivity can build strength and vibrancy. We must keep up these core traditions and not give in to the fear and rhetoric that is inherent in so much of political speech these days. For that, we need compelling strategies and arguments that are based on data and facts, and that don't undermine the need for stringency in security for visitors and immigrants to this country. We also need to tell the stories of refugees, of the men, women, and children whose lives have been devastated and who are seeking better futures. We invited you here as community leaders and as stakeholders. In a minute, we'll go around the room for each person to introduce him or herself. Then I'll introduce our special guest, who will be up on the screen, Dr. Georgette Bennett, who will speak about the broader issues followed by questions. Then we'll move to Edleva Beko, who directs Refugee Resettlement for Jewish Family Service, who will speak about what happens once a refugee is admitted to the United States. Both Georgette and Edleva will also share pieces of their personal stories and why they are moved to act on these issues. During the program today, please be thinking of ways you might be able to act on the information shared today as an individual or through an organization. Even as we may be frustrated with policy and perspective, each of us can do something, whether it be through advocacy, granting, volunteering, or just deciding that we're going to go to holiday parties and try to engage people in informal conversations about these issues. We'll wrap up our event with a brainstorming discussion for you to share your ideas and for us all to walk out of here with an action plan.